more than your iPod player. Like, my God, he right hard, I ball on you figures. Yo, they throw backs, give it away for free like, oh boy. Go and make noise when you hear, hope you jump for joy. I'm optimistic, glass ain't half empty, it's half full. Hopefully by now you know me from the jazz council, that was years ago. So I brought more fire to douse dudes and playing by house rules. I lay back like a couch dude. I'm that dude to make his own beats, writes his own rhymes, records his own shit. Probably why it takes so much time to put out an album. Man, I'm always behind schedule. Ain't that I ain't hungry, I just always got my plate full. Try to digest all the topics that I'm spitting. You need to sit back and actually take the time to listen. We living in a new age where mind states are feeble. Kids' attention spans are shorter than Danny DeVito. My beats though, be banging, be about my business. Bass stays knocking like a Jehovah Witness. Leave them scattering when chattering, the gang of rhyme patterns. I ain't worth challenging, you all need some aspirin. Aspiring to be me, no empires to feed. Just a chosen few that's flowing through, firing up the weed. Jesus, crazy what the world coming to. I'm here to live it, make music. But y'all is just hanging on a gimmick, huh? Wait a minute, man, don't get me confused with none of these newbie ass rappers, man. I know the game be feeling fucked up, but I've been making beats since 95, regardless if I had the right promotion or not. Word up. Hey yo, I ain't always humble, I ain't always intense. I've had my good and bad days like anyone else, more or less. Probably a lot more than less, or the more of it in a sense. Feel blessed, so I just move forward through the stress. But don't smoke stress, smoke the bombest weed you ever seen. Cannabis club category, certified Cali Green. Type of bomb that I keep up in my sack. They give a lot of cats anxiety attacks, there's no denying the facts. But enough about the weed though, I keep it on a need to know basis. It's time for me to cut to the chase quick. So download this free LP, spread it to your friends and family, even to the little haters mad at me. I got 2 official LPs coming after these. So far I'm grateful for the love that's coming back to me. Truly appreciate the support, especially my peeps that had my back when I was going in and out of court. But of course a shout out to all my people who kept the game alive instead of killing it, selling out with weak flows. My crew, anyone that gave an honest point of view, much respect besides me, man. I do this shit for you, yeah, for you.
Like to play games also. In this game, it's very important to listen to all the instructions, and we're going to combine your things in this game.
Yeah. Pop, so suspect. Now as my rhyme surpasses, see visions are overpasses. Some choose to overlook it, they should be looking past it. We hope the classics, we over you whack bastards. Soul suspects, man, we fall from the average. People try to act like they shit don't stink. They'll be up shit's creek, plus their ship's gon' sink. Now they knee deep in bullshit with nothing to think. On the brink of dealing with the most unpleasant of things. Time switch up, find ways to humble your strut. Just when you was thinking you was the next runner up, shit out of luck, yo, it's just the way it goes. I ain't gotta stress the rest, all you already know. From a distance, street lights start to filter in. Home from a round trip, had to visit new lands. Back in the building again, back from building with fam. Spaced out, sleep deprived, staring at the ceiling fan. So many things that they said to us when we was kids, but it was all bullshit. Yeah, open up your eyes. They would try to tell us one thing, then say the next thing. So I say, never listen to the lies. Man, everyone's a critic, just spit it how you live, it's how it's meant to be intended. So open up your eyes. It's all part of the game, ain't nothing but a dang dog. So I say, learn to read between. Yo, you going at it all wrong, so open your eyes. Yo, them cats be living life like they got 9 lives, so don't try. I hit very hard for my size 6'2", a little over 185, so get it right. They tough talk is filled with fallacies. Believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. So please, they can go and try to play the road as positive, but either way they talk with it, we know when they prerogative. Even if they polish up their image with some party tracks, we see through the lies, we ain't even need a polygraph. This is passion, the vibe is everlasting. It's better than the last one and colder than the aspens. Used to be overreacting, now I'm overreacting. Now pissed off, I'm mad at me, and I'm over here laughing. Shit is crazy, ain't it? The game is crazy, tainted, but I'ma do my thing and stay crazy fade. So many things that they said to us when we was kids, but it was all bullshit. Yeah, open up your eyes. They would try to tell us one thing, then say the next thing. So I say, never listen to the lies. Man, everyone's a critic, just spit it how you live, it's how it's meant to be intended. So open up your eyes. It's all part of the game, ain't nothing but a dang dog. So I say, learn to read between the lines.
What's going on, folks? Microphone's on. Howdy, howdy, howdy. I am a little bit discombobulated getting myself together. Not as organized as I would like to be. But we'll get there. How's everybody doing? Microphone check. Let's see. Let's get some tunes going. Okay. I forgot to even mention it at all this week. It is Paintover Friday, and I forgot to ask for submissions from people, but I do have a couple left over from last week that we can look at, and I have one other thing that I think would be cool to look at. What do we got? Oh, we got lots of people in the chat already. What's going on, Clark, Luis, Jean-Marc? Good to see you, buddy. Mia Yanas, Milan, Stefan. What's going on, guys? It is Friday. Not that the days are that different right now, because we're all just hanging out at home, but it's Friday. And we got Sebastian in the house. What's going on, Sebastian? You are the man. Good to see you, bud. I don't know what you're saying. Just have to stay up so late. It's like 7 o'clock over there. But I'm happy to have you here, bud. Okay, so let me just kind of finish getting myself organized here. Yeah, I think Paintovers are awesome. They're a lot of fun. So I'll figure out a way to let people know more about it. And we'll do Paintovers every Friday. And it's fun. I don't really need to prepare anything besides opening up a couple of files. If anybody has any raw renderings, sketches, finished renderings, anything that they think I could potentially add my 2 cents to, I'd be happy to. Today we're going to be looking at some kind of finished renderings, which like sometimes it's worth like painting over for those, and sometimes it's kind of worth just looking at kind of what could be done better, and kind of, it's like if it's a finished rendering, painting over it, if it's like a small change, tends to just look bad because of the difference between, you know, sloppy Photoshop work and finished rendering. But we're going to see that today, so it should be fun. Cheers to everyone. Again, it is Friday. No, not middle of the night. I'm early afternoon my time. Okay, so let's see. We got a couple of things to look at today. Where'd OBS go? Okay. And okay, this is an image that Luca sent over. This was, if I remember correctly from his email. Hopefully you guys can all see that. Oh, and you guys can't hear anything. You guys should be able to hear some music in the background. Let me know if that's loud enough. If it should be louder, if it should be quieter. But we have this finished rendering from Luca, and this was a photo study, I believe he said. And I glanced at the photo that he kind of based this on. And interesting enough, the kind of things that first jumped up at me when I looked at it would also be true for the photograph. So yeah, so let's kind of hop into it. Like some of the first things that jump at me, and I guess as like a caveat before we get into any of this, everything in like these Paintovers is just kind of like, it's my opinion. It's definitely not the right answer or something that needs to be fixed or not fixed. It's just the things that kind of jump out to my eye. And for this one it's pretty obvious. Like the first thing that jumps out into my eye, and it jumps out to my eye in the photograph too, which I don't think I have. I do not have it saved handy. But it's this guy, right? We have this giant dark light kind of sitting right in the middle of the image. I think we'll probably, like, it's the darkest thing in the image, right? If we look at it in black and white, and there's kind of a weird relationship going on between let's see here, get a pen to draw with. there's this very strange relationship going on between this and the bed, all right? It's directly over top of the bed visually, but it's sitting over top of something, you know, here-ish. Dun, dun, dun. Yes, it's sitting over top of something there. And the relation of it is just, A, it's visually confusing because it's right in line with the bed. And it's also just kind of sitting there as though it wants to highlight something, which I guess is the bed, and maybe that was the photographer's original point. But for me, it doesn't quite work because it's not actually over the bed. And we have this kind of big open foreground. So I think the first thing that I would do if this was my image, if I was working on it, my gut is to move it kind of this way. And let's get some brushes together. That guy will do fine. Do we have any opacity on that? We do not have any opacity on that. You can put some opacity on that. So let's kind of paint out the offending things. Right. And you guys can probably see pretty quickly, like, painting over finished images. I'm sure some people can do it really well. I'm not a great painter. And as a result, it tends to kind of stand out. But let's go ahead and actually, let's not even worry about the cord. Let's just let's go ahead and content aware delete that guy. See how Photoshop does. Not too bad. Let's go to that. And so it's going to get a little bit messy, but I'm alright with it. Put a line in here. Does it look good there? And now kind of this kind of wants something to be here, no? But what I think, what I'm trying to do is get something so that it's not fighting with the bed, and it's still kind of fighting with the bed. I wonder if it's a cropping issue. But let's not do it so that it deletes things. I think cropping this image significantly would help. And then whenever you start thinking about cropping in this, especially for 3D, you can also move cameras, right? And that's kind of a hard thing to show if you can't draw well, and I can't. But this starts to kind of make a little bit more visual sense to me. The other thing that you could do is if you didn't do the cropping, see how, like, let's go back to the original. Everything that we kind of want to look at is right here in this image, and it's visually a little confusing, right? And the first goal of composition is for things to be clear. One of the things that we could do right now, the horizon in this image is, you know, oops, give me red. What the horizon in this image is somewhere there, maybe even a little higher, somewhere like there, almost straight in the middle of the image. And I'm inclined to think that maybe if you move the camera down, you can move this over to kind of this part of the image, and this up here, so that then you get a relationship kind of between the two strongest visual elements. And this isn't really necessarily anything that you did wrong, because the photograph that you were copying from or practicing from and studying from did all these things. But I think it would be worth going in and taking a step and seeing how you can improve it. And I think having a clear idea of the composition. There's also, just because I'm looking at this and I can't help it, we kind of have this, like, this is all like pure 255, 255, 255 white just about. And so those are so incredibly blown out that if they're going to stay blown out, that's not what I wanted. I would start and add a whole bunch of bloom to the image. We can overdo it at first. Generally speaking, I try to avoid having any pure whites. But if you're gonna have things that are so bright that they're completely blowing out an image, you're gonna want that to kind of at least have some bloom, and then you'd want to have this be darker. Right? We can actually select that. We're not going to worry about our selection too much. Let's see. This selection is all over the place. Kind of thought I was selecting one thing and I selected something else. Yeah, but whatever. And then you just pull it down just enough so that you get a line there. Right? Like, right now, this is a little bit brighter than this part of sky. I would reverse that so that the sky feels brighter. And then you base everything around that. I don't know if that made any sense. Let's just paint this guy out again. Yeah, I think I would, if I was working on this image, I think I would crop it down. If I was going back into 3D, which obviously I wouldn't try to fix the things that I'm suggesting in post. I think before just cropping it, because you have some like nice elements over here on the side which are really cool. I think I would try just shifting stuff as opposed to cropping, right? I think this rug could probably use a little bit of work. You can kind of see the noise in the from the map you used. Using like hair and fur over top of that will give you a convincing result to kind of like soften that and tone your whites down. And that might be from sharpening, but you want kind of like a little bit more control over those brights. What else? Those are my big things. I think it's mostly camera movement and potentially just moving this light, like moving it to whatever the next beam is. Controlling your highlights, setting up a composition where you have more moving across the page, right? In this kind of cropped version, you start to have a relationship from the bottom left towards the top right. Hope you guys can kind of see that. As opposed to if we don't move anything, we'll leave it black and white because it's easier. See how kind of everything that we want to look at is still over here. So when you look at this image, there's not much moving you around. Moving around the image. So I think that's about what I would say. Play with the camera, move this light either through how the camera moves or physically actually moving the 3D model of it. And then yeah, just protect your highlights. I think like this at a glance, it's super convincing from a photorealistic side, which is awesome, great work. But like if we go in and zoom up here, we can see that there's something kind of clearly wrong with the metal against the sky, right? I think a little bit of bloom bringing down so that there's a little bit of color information in those pieces, I think will help. But yeah, great work. And I hope you enjoyed doing the photo study. I feel like you can learn a lot, but don't assume just because it's a photograph that doesn't mean things can't be improved. I think they definitely can. But great work, Luca, and thank you for sending me an image to look at. And I'm not really looking at the chat again. I gotta pay attention here. Vlad's in the house. Alan, what's going on? Hello to Slovenia. Nitin, no worries, bud. No worries. Thank you for being here. We actually have an image from you to look at here in a second. And I think... there we go. Let's get the high resolution version. And we'll save that to... Almost there. Almost there. What's going on? Save it in there. There we go. Okay. That is way better. Yes, Instagram sends things super pixelated. Or not super pixelated, but super low res. So, from Nitin, we've got this guy. Which is kind of a lovely take on like a dusk dinner. Okay, so... Again, so we're looking at like a very finished kind of, very kind of like refined rendering. And for this one, there's kind of like a nice kind of like cool color coming across from like, it looks like the colors of the walls, but also the light coming in through the window, which is like ambient city light or maybe moonlight. Yeah, just gathering my thoughts on what I would change. This is still relatively pixelated, and I'm wondering if that's because this is... No, okay. For Paintover reasons, that's perfectly fine. So, my first thought is that we want more separation between kind of the subject of this image, which is everything sitting here on the table, and then the room itself. And this is something that you could do in 3D, and I would probably like tweak a bit in 3D, but this is definitely like a post type of work. And so one of the things that we can do first is we can desaturate the blue just a little bit. What happens if we darken it? And we can, actually we'll darken it. We could be a little bit brighter, I think, in some of these little highlights, but let's see here. And then let's go ahead and actually we'll turn this up to full saturation so we can kind of see where we're painting. Oops. If you're making adjustments like this, sometimes it's nice to kind of overdo it so you can see where you're overdoing it, and then obviously we're not going to leave it this bright ugly orange. It's more kind of so I can see exactly what I'm painting in. And part of me is like still thinking of how I'd go about fixing this. And then I think that wants to move more towards like a yellowish color. Maybe that gets a little bit brighter. Okay. The other thing, you can see kind of like at a glance like how bright, even when we zoom out, how bright like that bottom floor is. And so let's add some like kind of moody vignette in. Do the same on the top. Again, we know where we're trying to get everyone to focus, right? We're trying to get them to focus onto the table. And then we can, if we want to give this kind of like, so this is a copy merged that's sitting over the top and set to screen. Excuse me. And we're going to paint into that mask in a second. But we're going to keep kind of adding. I feel like the idea of this image is that we have this kind of like romantic or kind of intimate, warm, cozy dinner table setup. And so kind of everything that I do is trying to work towards like that idea. And there's a good chance that I've already kind of darkened this. If this is an image for yourself, this is the way that I would edit it, both professionally and for a client. But that being said, if you went quite as dark as I'm kind of going right now, I'd say there's a decent chance that they're going to say it's too dark. But that's okay, because then you can pull it back a little bit and you'll be all right. So that's kind of the initial direction that I would go, which is to bring stuff into the front, and we can even let's see, where's color dodge? I don't even have the chat window up on my screen anywhere. Knitting raw render. That's good to know. I don't. Obviously, there's still a lot of noise in this, so I'm assuming that this is still a test. I would probably, if I was doing this, I would kind of fix some of these things in 3D. So obviously, like, you can adjust turn down the intensity of the light coming out, turn up the intensity coming down from these lights. Obviously, like, the glowy stuff tends to be easier to do in post, but you can kind of get like the balance. Let's go super strong with this one.
I am the voice of the streets of those who decide whether or not I'm hot by the choice of my beats. The sad and sorrowful cry, the struggle of those who died in the hustle and lost lives while confined in the jungle. I did 5 while confined in a bubble. You kept me sane, hoping one day I could say that you kept me paid. And the radio stations kept me played, or maybe not, and they slept cause my depth was way too deep. You're the 2 feet I stand on, the true dream I planned on. The new beat, me and my
So let's see. So we went from like this to this guy, and like there's some, you know, like this got a little sloppy. It could be the it's kind of from this one. We can actually fix that. Okay. So I think I'll probably then come in. Let's kind of paint some of the things. Like, I don't think we want all of the back of these chairs quite as dark as I've made them. So let's just kind of. One of the nice things about doing some of these changes that I'm suggesting in 3D is that you can adjust materials to account for this type of stuff. So if you make all these changes and the lighting looks great, but the back of these chairs are completely black, you can just go in and brighten the material, because no one will ever know. I'm a big fan of cheating. So that would be like my quick adjustment. I would also maybe I'm not sure about this, but let's try it. I'd also maybe consider, let's grab a yellowish color, and draw with a bit more power. I'd also maybe consider turning these lights. Oh, that's not the right color at all. I would also, I don't know if you've like experimented at all with turning these lights on. And you would definitely want to do it in a way that that's like relatively subtle. And I'm not sure whether or not I actually like this idea or not. Again, we're kind of overdoing the idea here to get an idea of where I'm painting stuff. And then we can kind of change this to... I think I would try and turn these lights on. It's a little weird to me that they're in this image and off, and that was not the best example of turning them on. But I feel like if you have them and you were setting up this kind of like dinner scene, you would have those lights on. And if you're gonna have them off, maybe you change them to something else, or remove them altogether. Right now they kind of grab attention. Here they grab a little bit more attention, but there's at least a reason for them to be there. Let's just add a little bit of light onto these shades. I'm assuming that these are solid metal shades. Maybe they changed to light metal shades. Alright, we could just kind of... I'm not sure, but I think something needs to be done with them. So that's the direction that I would go. I hope that's helpful. It's a little bit sloppy, but you know, it's a Paintover. One thing that's kind of worth mentioning here, I think, is that the kind of main thing that I'm doing is I'm trying to create a hierarchy in the lights in this scene. So in here, they're kind of all equally powered, right? Like we have candlelight, we have some kind of ambient lights coming down from these pendants, and then we have the light coming in from outside. Here you can kind of see which one's more quote unquote important in the image, right? The fill light coming through the window is secondary to the lights on the table because it's about the table. I would consider also definitely toning down. Oops. There we go. I would definitely tone down this pillow that's sitting over here. And I would also consider having this light either coming down, like in this direction, as though it's like a kind of a fake moonlight, or if you're imagining this as like street lights or something like that, try having it come up. There's a little... The fact that we're getting an actual hard shadow right at the edge, like it blurs out very nicely across the image. But the fact that we get a hard shadow here at the window says that it's coming from a light source. That could be the moon, that could be a headlight, it could be a street light. If it's just dusk ambient light, I think this would be even softer. But the fact that it's coming straight across is a little bit strange. More conceptually than visually to me. So I would maybe... I would maybe consider just moving that a little bit so that it comes down a little bit, which might be nice. Let's see. If we wanted it to come down a little bit, it would kind of come like this. That would kind of start to come like this. This would start to come down. It would come down maybe like, who knows how much, it doesn't really matter. Darkness would come down a bit. I think down might be nice, because it also creates some diagonals, like some very soft diagonals. it kind of feels like quote-unquote moonlight to me to begin with. So you can kind of start to create some diagonals in the scene. If you were to turn these lights on, it gives them a little bit of room to grow. This is nitpicking. To be clear, this is nitpicking at this point. But let's kind of see what happens when we toggle that on and off. I feel like bringing it down, it's nice. It gives these paintings a little bit more prominence, even though they will get a little bit darker. But it also kind of starts to point, these lines start to point down towards our subject, which is this table that, now that I'm looking at it, might have too many wine glasses on it. You might want to kind of, right now, we have 8 chairs. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 wine glasses. What I would maybe do is I would pull them out a little bit, or reduce the number of them. And I would also keep in mind that like red wine likes to be like, especially when it's lit like this from above, gets like really dark and bright, where you have this like nice, deep, vibrant red. And I would maybe give that like a little bit more room. And this is also way nitpicking, but it does appear that the red wine glasses have rosé in it and the white wine glasses have red in it. Not something that matters at all, but if you were showing this to like a client for a luxury project, they would notice that, and they would probably make you change it. So like the big wide ones, like a Bordeaux glass, will also give you more red to kind of speckle in, and I really like the idea of pulling this kind of like deep, beautiful, saturated red into the top of the table. It tends to read very, very well. So paint some in. Give me that. Give me that. There we go. All right. I think that those are my 2 cents on like what I would start changing in this image. I wouldn't use multiple suns because you don't have a ton of control over suns. I would use for the moon, I would just use a disc light, and then you can control the exact size of it, and you have more control than a sun in that case. If you're doing ambient light, you can do that with like just any type of plain light to be nice and soft. But the moon, if you look at, you know, moon, let's pull up an image. The moon gives surprisingly sharp shadows. Moonlit interior room. Oops. Let's see if we get a photograph. You don't generally see it that well unless you actually photograph it. Any good examples? That's not a good example. That looks heavily post-processed, and it does not read as accurate to me. Can't really see that. Oh, stock photos. Can you give me a bigger version of this? You can see that there's a relatively sharp photo there. Let's look at moonlit exterior. Moonlit landscape. And see if we can't find a good photography. Not a painter. Yeah, I'm not finding anything. That's kind of what I wanted to see. This one's actually a good picture. So ignore how we got a bunch of it. That's kind of misty. You can still see a strong shadow. You still get a clear sense of directionality from the moon, but you can also see like a clear, heavy shadow here. Hopefully you guys can see that on your screen. And that's coming from the moon, right? And like usually it's all so dark that you don't really get a you don't really see it that well with your naked eye. But when you photograph it, the moon will give you relatively sharp, or surprisingly, let's say, sharp shadows. So you can kind of play with that. I can. Where did I post that? I did a moonlit similar scene to this a while ago. I'm just trying to think where it lives. It was before Droki, so maybe it's on. Maybe it's on an old account. One second. This will, if I can find it, this is a number of years old. This is less moonlit and more, where is this image? This is kind of more of like the street light idea coming across than moonlight. But you get the blues, the warmths, you have a main light kind of coming in. That was a really old sketch. That was back in, that was 4 or 5 years ago. Okay, so anyways, thank you, Nitin, for submitting this. This image looks great, and I think it's going to be awesome. Hopefully that is helpful to you. The last thing that I think we're going to look at today is this image that I made, I don't know, a year or two ago. Let me catch up on the chat here. Luca, you're very welcome, my friend. Thank you for sending your photo study. Great work on it. Really, really great work. I would keep pushing it forward and, you know, outshine the photographer, right? 3D artists unite. But beautiful work. And thank you for sending it. Let's see, Jafar, did you miss a lot? You missed a bit. We did a bit of painting, and kind of quick thoughts on Luca's stuff and then Nitin's stuff. Nitin asked a question, would you prefer HDRI or cold sun for moonlight? I'm going to go with an actual light every time for moonlight. Because it's not the main source of typically not going to be the main source of light in your scene. You do want something else being the main one, probably, at least for an interior, which makes the moonlight, quote unquote, like a secondary light. And so you want to be able, it's not really important to have like all of the resources of an HDRI and the variation you get from that in color. What you do want to have is the control so that it's working specifically for your composition. So yeah, definitely not an HDRI. Okay, so one last little painting challenge. We have 15 minutes left. This is a sketch I made, I think last year, maybe the year before. I like the overall kind of tonality that came out of this image. But this was before I did a lot of Paintovers, and one of the things, since I made it, even like while I was initially posting it, the composition to me feels off balance. Let's kind of get rid of all of the distractions, because it is a dark image, so it's a little bit easier to see without everything. But for whatever reason, once it was done, I really felt like all of the like these highlights. Why can't we see? Oh, because we have the wrong brush. So it really feels like all of these highlights are sitting too far to the right of the image. I don't know if you guys see that as well. It just feels, the composition feels not balanced. I went back and looked to see if I did a paint over at any point in this. I did not. So we're going to do one now, and we're not going to do it on the final image. This was the raw render that I used to make this. And so the kind of thought I have, and it's less obvious here than it is here, but I want to see if we go back and paint over this guy. quickly if we can kind of fix that at a basic step that we could have fixed in 3D. I'm not going to go back and fix this image, but I think it'll be a good little exercise. Because there it's like very clear that this is a problem to me. So let's start playing. First thing we're going to do, the color on this is all over the place. Usually even if I'm working in black and white and I'm looking at it in black and white in the frame buffer, I'll still render it in color because who knows, you might want to use it later. But for the Paintover, we're definitely going to move it to black and white. And let's kind of start kind of big and rough by just moving it. Right? Or actually, you know what we're going to do for this one? Is we're going to give ourselves a little bit of extra canvas. We'll paint it in black, but because there's one thing, the first kind of like thing that we could have maybe done. Let's go with a relatively hard brush. Let's go with my little triangle guy. And we'll make it nice and big. So like one thing that we could have done with this image, right, is just pull it out. What size is this? We don't need it that big. We're just slowing brushes down at that point. Wondering why this brush was so slow. And besides the fact that I think I need a new computer, there's our answer. So we could have done something where like it comes all the way out to here. We'll put some like light gray so we can see that something's here. So that would have been kind of one option. I don't think we want to come out that far. That does kind of help center the subject, right? So this will keep coming up one way or another. But I don't think that was the answer. But it does help a little bit, having some stuff over here. I'm gonna kind of move the tonality. Oops. Move the tonality back towards what I knew. Like I kind of knew what the overall look of this was gonna be altogether. On the color version, I never finished the color version. That was the color raw render that we're working from. I don't think we have time. Oops, that's not what I wanted to paint into. I don't think we have time to try and do a color version of it, but we could probably do a quick color edit. 150, maybe. And then this kind of highlighty thing would be coming out there. Let's go ahead and actually give this a hard border of that guy. Maybe all the way out to here. Let's see. Let's lock that so I don't accidentally paint in it. Let's get back to a painterly brush. Right, and then we can keep bringing these out. Maybe this guy's a problem. Maybe that guy needs to fall back into the background a little bit. Maybe we needed a little bit more color in here. Not that much. We're kind of trying to just control how much the attention grows, right? Let's fill that with black in the background so we can compare it. Black mode behind. I think maybe the cropping actually was not a bad idea. And kind of bring back some of these harder lines. Maybe this we want to tone down just a little bit. Maybe that's actually part of the problem. Ooh, that's much better. Right, giving this kind of subject. See how close that sits together? Giving that like a little bit of room, and maybe that one to be lower as well. I like that a lot. Alright, we can still have a little bit of stuff happening back here. Yeah. Again, obviously, if you're trying to get the eye to go somewhere, you have the option in black and white, and kind of in color as well, of either making the dark part darker. You basically just want to increase the contrast, right? And so we're just gonna kind of keep sketching. Obviously, we know that this big guy is kind of our main focus here. And we can just keep going. Oops. That's already feeling, I mean, obviously it's sloppy, but that feels better to me quite a bit. If I'm just thinking of the composition, moving this over, and maybe this kind of comes down again here. I think something like that would have been better. I mean, like what, we painted on that for like 5 minutes? We painted on that for 5 minutes, and what was kind of, what was like my biggest takeaway from it was, okay, you know, this area right here, this area right here is like a major problem, right? And these are sitting super close, so they're kind of fighting each other. But I think what's probably worth noticing is that I didn't actually pick that out right away. It wasn't until I started kind of scribbling over things that I'm like, oh, this is a major thing that I should have noticed. I should have been able to look at my rendering initially, I think, and seen that that's too tight, right? But it wasn't until I actually started drawing that I noticed it. And I think that there's a value in anything that gets you to look at your work more closely, and trying to draw and fix these little things that are niggling in your head are worth practicing. So if I made this again, I think I would adjust the crop so that this building sits more in the middle, right? Like this feels very right heavy to me. But I would adjust it not by moving the actual camera, but just by extending it off to the right. I think I'd keep the camera in the same place, and then I would adjust these buildings. And now these, what's it called? These kind of chimneys are probably, there's probably too much contrast in them at very least, right? So you can either, oops, I don't know what's going on there. So we can either paint them out, and then we'd probably, I think to make those will look better if they were in the image elsewhere. Right, so we could kind of make that a motif where you start seeing them somewhere else. Something like that. And then, depending on how anal you want to get about things, you can really kind of figure out like what the shape is that you want of this building. But that might be, once you get to this point, you're kind of... I'm noodling, and it's almost 2 o'clock. So yeah, so we went from this to that as far as painting goes, but we're comparing it to this. And yeah, I dropped the ball, I think, on this composition. And this is, I think, much better. There you go. That was my Paintover Friday, guys. I hope everyone's doing well. I did want to leave in the chat. Yesterday we had Pedro hanging out in the house from Arky 9, and they are doing one of their art jams starting in like 2 minutes. Where's their copy link? Let me make sure I copied the link. Arky 9 visualization. /live. That should take everyone to the Arky 9 page. That should be starting. Oh, that's where that music's coming from. That should take everyone to Arky 9's page, and it looks like they're doing something cool again today, and I think it'd be fun to look at it. So that's where I'm going to be going, literally in 2 minutes. Get yourself a fresh beer and join Pedro and his team while they, go through and make something beautiful. Always a lot of fun. Thank you all for hanging out. Very much appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll be getting to the sketch that we started yesterday, and we'll be taking that into 3D and roughing that out quickly and seeing if we can get like a base idea. Like within an hour, we should be able to get that to start looking like what we want, and then we can start scattering and all that kind of fun stuff. Oh wait, is it over already? Did I miss the Arky 9 thing? Well, either way, it'll still be live, or it should still be live, or still on their webpage, the Art Jam. Either way, go check it out. It'll be fun. Ian, Clark, Alan, Jafar, Eric, thank you guys for being here. Thank everyone in the chat. Thank everyone sitting and watching and working or doing their own personal projects and having this on the background. I do appreciate it. We'll see you tomorrow. We'll be jumping into 3D again. It'll be fun. Be well, guys. Take care. Later.